Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Manga Goes to School, Incorporating Manga into Your Curriculum Collection and School Community, presented by AASL in partnership with Booklist. I'm Sarah Hunter, Books for Youth and Graphic Novels editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. A link to today's slide presentation was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides by copying the URL on the screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable them on your screen, please look for and click the Show Captions icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of them at any time by selecting Caption Settings. And finally, Booklist expects all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates the standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. We have a wonderful program for you today, so without further ado, let's meet our panelists, the authors of Manga Goes to School, Cultivating Engagement and Inclusion in K-12 Settings. Emily Ratica has been in education for over 17 years, both as a teacher and a school librarian. She is currently back in the classroom teaching high school English in the high desert in Southern California. She has presented about manga and comics at various conferences and conventions around the country, including ALA, AASL, CSLA, and SDCC. Julie Stivers is the upper school librarian at Carolina Friends School and the author of the AASL Shared Foundation Guide, Include. She considers exploring the power of manga and anime with her students a central piece of her library practice. Sybil Mouna Touré is an artist and youth services public librarian based in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. She has been self-publishing original comics and zines since 2013 and currently organizes library events teaching zine making and comic art to teens. Sara Smith is a district librarian from California and has reviewed over 1,000 manga for Booklist, School Library Journal, and the Graphic Library. She is also a frequent presenter at conferences, podcast guest, and writer of many articles about manga in school libraries. Ashley Hawkins is a school librarian, adjunct professor, and professional writer and reviewer for Booklist and her site, Manga Librarian. Her primary goal is to ensure that every student has access to books they love, particularly manga, light novels, and manhwa. Unfortunately, Ashley is unable to join us today, but I am thrilled to pass the mic to Emily, Julie, Mouna, and Sara. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. We are very excited to be here and share our work with you. So let's just get started. On to the next. That's all of our information. I believe we're sharing these slides with you. So if you can't get all of it down real fast, you'll see it when we share the slides. Next. Go ahead and hit next. So I'm going to talk just really quickly about the basics of manga as the format of manga, because I know we probably have various levels of manga exposure in our audience. So go ahead and hit next for me. Manga is pronounced manga. Often I'll hear manga. It is not, it's manga. And it can be both singular and plural. You wouldn't say there's mangas, just manga. And also it's important to note that just like graphic novels, they are a format, not a genre. There are so many different genres within the area or the format of manga that we want to make sure to include all of the variety. Next. Okay, so we also got a question about how to read manga, but before I get into the actual mechanics of reading manga, I think it's really important to always acknowledge the language we use when we talk about manga. Oftentimes when students will pick up a manga for the first time, students, adults, whomever, they'll pick up a manga and they'll be like, this is backward. Because it's in a flipped format. So I always think of that as an opportunity to have an intentional conversation with students about language, right? Manga is not backward. Backward implies like old-fashioned, kind of antiquated, even like dumb, right? We use backward to kind of signify that. So instead of saying backward, I'll always try and get students to change their thinking and say it's not backward, it's just in a flipped format, or it's printed in the way the author intended for you to see it. So one of the big things I think that people love about manga is that they have an exposure to something that's different from what they see every day. So reading in the Japanese style allows them to experience their culture in a very real way. So I always try and be intentional in how we think about manga. But another way that it helps me when I'm reading manga is that I think of the S. In comics, you think of like a Z, right? We go in a Z format, but in manga, it's like an S. You start in the opposite way and you work your way down the page. So think of the S when you think of manga. Next. So let's talk about collection development. We got a lot of questions about recommendations, and Sarah's going to go over that later. But let's talk about how to develop a good manga collection. Next. Always do your research. This is something that is true of all librarians. We always do our research. We love research. So just like when a learner requests a title of a text-based book, you do research to make sure that it fits with your students and with your community. The same is true of manga. There is a lot of information out there. It's not necessarily all in one place, but if a learner requests a title, there is research that you can do. Sarah's going to talk more about that and how to access those professional reviews, but always do your research. Next. All right, so I'm going to talk about ordering and maintaining manga. Next. So manga can be very intimidating because it gets really long, right? We get these long series that have, I mean, One Piece, I think, is at like 120 something right now. And how, as a librarian, especially a school librarian, how do we accommodate for that? It's just not possible for us. We don't have the space, we don't have the money for these really long series. So it's important to remember the hammock effect. There's a lot of interest at the beginning of a manga. And there's generally a lot of interest at the end of the manga. Middle tends to be a little on the uninterested side. So when you are buying series, especially these longer series, I always recommend buy multiple copies of the first few. Those are the ones that are going to get checked out the most. Those are the ones that are going to have the most interest in them. Don't stress about trying to get every single one. I made the mistake. I know Sarah's made this mistake where we bought a whole bunch. I bought like 50 of Naruto. A whole bunch of kids read the first like 10. One kid read like number 43. Your kids aren't making it all the way through these series except for those, random outliers. So it's okay to spend your money on buying those first few copies and buying more of them because that's where the interest really is going to be. Of course, always listen to your readers. If you have a bunch of students who really want a specific title and they want, a big series, of course, listen to them, but this also is an opportunity to utilize that digital content. If you don't have the space for those long series, a lot of the publishers and more are becoming available online. So use that digital content. Like, yeah, I have the first 10, but maybe check out number 50, through our e-library. This was also an opportunity for me with my library to reach out to the local library. I didn't have the space or the money for, the huge long series, but they did. So they were able to support students in a way that I wasn't. So I was at least able to say, hey, I don't have it, but I know the county library has it. And they actually helped me get e-cards for all of my students so that they could access their digital library as well. So, reach out to the people around you for help. Next. Start small. Don't buy these big box sets. They look appealing because they're cheaper, but start small. Okay. Be prepared to replace these because they are paperback. And it costs a lot of money. So sometimes buying, 2 or 3 copies, 3 or 4 copies of the first, the second, the third will do better service to your students than buying, 1 copy all the way through. Because as soon as that number 1 is gone and you only have 1 copy, nobody's reading the rest. So start small and be prepared to replace those earlier volumes. Manga does have short series and single volumes. So don't feel like you have to buy these huge long series. There are plenty of series that have a start and an end, and they're much more manageable. Death Note, Tokyo Ghoul, these are all series that were, much shorter, and there was a start and an end. And the students like that more sometimes because they felt like they could achieve it, in reading. But also buy a wide variety, just like every other area in your library. There's so much in manga. There's action and adventure and romance and slice of life. And there's so many different types. Buy a variety, because just because you have the student in front of you begging you for Demon Slayer doesn't mean there's somebody else who doesn't know that there's manga out there that they would be interested in. So try and buy a wide variety to appeal to all your learners. Another big thing too is that there are some classics in manga that still have a huge appeal. So even though a title is older, it does not mean that it won't get read. Tokyo Ghoul was one of the most popular titles in my library. I actually had 3 sets of it, and it's older for manga. It's not a current manga. It's not publishing right now, but it was read constantly because it was such a huge hit. So generally, once you've got manga readers, they want to read everything that you have. They don't really care how old it is. Next. Yes, buying manga can be a pain. It is not necessarily published here all the time. So sometimes, like during the pandemic, the supply chain, broke down, and it affected manga just as much as anything else. So be aware and plan ahead if you can, if you have the money for it. If you know that a title is going to be really popular because it's got an anime, it's, or resurgence or something, try and buy those titles, and buy extras, because they will get checked out. And pay attention. Sometimes the publishers or the vendors will put them, with all best intentions, in a bundle, and sometimes that bundle won't have certain titles because they don't have them currently. So just be aware when you're purchasing that you understand like what you're buying. Okay, next. Okay, so options with maintaining. These are paperback books. The majority of them are going to be paperback. And if you're like my student, if your students are like my students, they will really beat up those paperbacks pretty quickly. They are the most available and they are the cheapest, but there are options too. Sometimes the publisher will rebind them, or give you a hardback option. They're more expensive, but they do last longer. Plastic covers, some publishers will provide those plastic covers for a little bit more time, or you can buy them yourself and do them. I highly recommend that you do something, because if you don't do anything, those paperbacks are going to wear out much, much faster. So just kind of be aware. Last thing here though, is sometimes publishers will shave the books when they're rebinding. This picture is actually from Sarah's shelf, and it's Black Butler. I think it's Black Butler. And those are all the same books. They're all the same, but you can see where some of these books were shaved around the edge, and that cuts out content. So just be aware that sometimes this happens with the rebinding and covering process. So you may lose some content in there. Always try and upcycle though, if you're allowed to. I often would have books be destroyed, and I would tear out the pages, and I would use them for bookmarks that students could color, and I would laminate them. It was always a fun activity for my students to do this. So if you're allowed to, try and reuse them, because they're engaging, they're interested in these books. Try and use them once they get destroyed. And next, I think I'm done. Yes, over to Sarah.
All right, cool. Thanks, Emily. Okay, so physical organization next. Okay, so I recommend custom call numbers if possible, if you have the ability to change your information in your system and your stickers, and shelve manga in its own section and arrange it by the title rather than the mangaka. So, and that's mangaka is the person who creates the manga. So students often and readers often come in looking for the manga by title. They'll come in and ask for Demon Slayer or ask for Full Metal. They're not asking like, hey, where is all of your Hiromu Arakawa stuff? Like, they don't know the name of the person who's making the stuff. They want to know where the book is. So I found a lot more success by shelving by title. And so then we changed our labels to accommodate for that and shelved it accordingly. And then I shelved the manga all by itself because it's oftentimes shorter And then I was able to get another shelf in our shelving units, which gave me more space. So space is at a premium with manga because there's a lot of it and the series are longer. So we were able to get more room in there. And then some vendors will accommodate and do custom call numbers, sometimes for a small fee. So we were able to request those for our new books from our vendors. Next. So our old shelving scheme, a lot of our manga was in the dreaded 741 umbrella. So we were putting ours in MAN. And then, so for example, we had like Toilet Bound Hanako-kun was in TOI for toilet. So the kids were looking for it, and I could just train them to look for it by the title, and it was a lot more successful that way. Next. And then here is a picture of our section. So on the left picture, you can see our comic books, and then the right picture, you see our manga. So we had 6 shelves in our unit for the manga and 5 shelves in the comics, because the comics are usually 10 inches tall and the manga is usually 8 inches tall. So we got more room in there for them. Next. And then we employ a lot of dynamic shelving in our district. Shout out to Kelsey Bogan, and there's her the name of her blog, Don't You Shush Me. She's got a couple of different blog posts about this because her philosophy is somebody got paid some good money to design this cover, so show it off. And that is the most engaging part of the book, is the cover. The spine is kind of cool, but the cover is much better. So put that outward facing as much as possible and get the students interested in the covers. So we have lots of different stands that we got from Demco, a couple of different things from Amazon. We also got a shelving unit from Demco that just hangs on the side of the shelf now as a little like U-clip, and different stands that goes on it. So we employ a lot of front-facing books on our shelving to engage the students and help them find stuff, because even though we have it by title, that doesn't mean that they can always find it, but we put as much forward as possible. Next. Reader's advisory stuff. Next. So we do a lot of reader's advisory as librarians, and a lot of our strategies can still apply for manga. So even if this is not your specialty, we're still pretty good at helping kids find books that they need. We just might need to do a little bit extra research to help them find a manga that they're interested in. So the first reader's advisory tip that we usually do is ask questions. So when a kid is looking for a book, we ask for like, what are their hobbies or interests? We're connecting them to other formats and genres. So if they're already interested in fantasy or romance, then you go out and find like a manga that is in that format, or sorry, in that genre. Engage with your readers. So manga and anime watchers, manga readers, they really like to gush. So they really like it when there's an adult that wants to talk, like listen to what they want to talk about with their reading. So let them talk about their favorite book or their favorite series, and then start, Googling or researching some series that are like that and see if you have something like that on your shelves, or go find a series that's like that and purchase it for them. Some places that you can research good titles. So SLJ has a blog called Good Comics for Kids. It's not just comics. They do a lot of blog posts that are just manga lists, like 4 or 5 different lists that are on a topic. So they'll have like, what's good in fantasy manga, what's good in slice of life manga. So they have a lot of different recommendations on genres, on different like hot and new. So there's a lot of lists in there that you can help with reader's advisory. Ashley and I both put out content that can help with reader's advisory. We have tags on our website that do genres. We're putting out like tons of articles all the time to help with connecting people to, like, you have this book, here's another read-alike that's like it, so you can research titles. Next. Okay, so Emily mentioned it earlier, the phenomenon called the anime bump. So if there is a show coming out then the print series is going to be more popular. You're going to have kids. And if there's a new season of a show coming out, then the kids are going to want to come in and read it. So if you're like, if you can research like what's coming out on Netflix or Crunchyroll, there's sites like Anime Planet or Anime News Network will have articles about, you know, what seasons are coming out, what shows are likely to be popular. They'll put out polls for viewers to rank what's their favorite or what's their most anticipated of what's coming out. So you can know ahead of time like what's coming out this fall that people are excited about, and make sure that you have some copies on your shelf for the people that are going to be flocking to you to get those books checked out. And then just like our other sections of the library, we buy the award winners. You know, we buy the Caldicots, we buy the Newberries. So in the manga world, we have the Eisners, we have the Harveys, and then new this year is the American Manga Awards. So that was given out at Anime NYC and promoting just greatness in manga. So, you know, we have these other awards that we can also grab the nominees or grab the winners and promote the award winners just like we do in other parts of the library. Next. And then there's also some reading lists that our library associations put out. So YALSA has a great graphic novel list that there's tons of manga on there. TLA has a Mavericks graphic novel reading list that there's also a lot of manga on there. And then GNCRT has some lists for adults and children. There's not quite a lot of manga on there yet, but hopefully one day there will be. And then for researching web comics, have been a lot of web comics coming to print now. So just like on Netflix and the other online platforms, they'll have like what's hot and new. If you just log into Netflix, like what's #1 on Netflix right now. Manga Plus, Webtoon, Manta, you can create free accounts, or you just go onto their website and it'll show you what's hot and popular, and what's getting most read right now. And a lot of times those things are getting picked up for print releases. Publishers are also looking at those websites and checking what should they be pulling to print. Next. All right, and that's off to Mouna.
Hello. So I'll be talking about mostly from my experience as a Black manga reader and librarian. So y'all already might know the concept of the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors from Dr. Rudinson's Bishop. And that's highly relevant in the context of especially Black and Latinx manga readers. So a lot of people do notice that a lot of anime and manga characters don't have visibly dark skin, but Black and Latinx readers have ways to relate, not only in the form of reading these characters' stories, but also through fan art and fan creation. The racial ambiguity of these characters often lends itself to that. In the picture, in the example we have pictured here, these are examples of, this is an example of a race-bent design. Race-bending is a reimagining of characters with features of a different race or ethnicity, primarily through fan art and cosplay. A common comment that the uninitiated often say is that anime and manga characters don't look Japanese or don't look Asian. One of the terms for that is mukokuseki, which means without nation or stateless. And that refers to Japanese characters in manga and anime not having really any racially defining features. Next slide. And more Black artists have been publishing manga-style comics both in print and online. One prominent publisher would be Saturday AM, which is based in North Carolina, run primarily by Black artists and creators. The two examples that I have pictured here are from the author S. Morishita. She's a Black artist who creates manga-styled comics such as Love, Love, Fighting and Catch Me, Fight Me, Love Me. A lot of romance stories. I love them a lot, and they have very very clear and explicit representation of Black and Asian characters. Let's see. And manga and queer communities go hand in hand frequently. The BL genre and the Yuri genre, BL being the boys love genre, Yuri being manga about women loving women stories. Those have been present throughout manga as a medium for decades, often having origins in the shoujo manga demographic. And the presence of androgynous character designs in all genres, so regardless of genre and regardless of target demographic, that's always been there and is often queer audiences are very receptive to that of all ages. Oh, and the character type known as, oh, I'm sorry, moving on. Manga and fandom and neurodivergent communities. Manga art is expressive. The imagery, visual cues convey emotions, ideas, or moods in manga that are clear and very readable, such as the popping vein gesture you'll often see to represent anger, or a sweat drop to represent awkwardness. And I myself, being a neurodivergent librarian, I read a lot of manga as a kid and as an adult, and I always wanted to find communities and people to share that passion with. And in the picture on the slide, I have an ita bag, which translates to pain bag, as in it took great pains to get all the merch you see displayed on the bag. And it's a wonderful conversation starter. You're starting to see them a lot more, especially among neurodivergent fans of manga and anime. Finding other fans of something that you love is so important among young readers and is a wonderful way to foster communities. Next slide. So I have a few recommendations for school club activities. Manga readers are often overlap with the artsy kids. The Venn diagram is almost a circle, I would say. So for club activities, I recommend collaborative activities, making fanzines, doing art trades, and also challenges. There are, especially during the fall, art challenges are huge during the fall, such as Sketchtember, Inktober, Hourly Comic Day, etc. And using video media such as TikTok or CapCut, you could do an AMV or fan cam screening to show fan videos of one's favorite anime or manga. You could do genre discussions, or you could also attend an anime convention as a club. A lot of anime conventions will have discounts or deals for organizations or school clubs. And if you see the QR code in this slide, there is a list of timed art challenges that you could use for school club activities.
Okay, thank you, Mouna. This is me. I'm Julie, high school librarian, recently a middle school librarian. So the conversation around manga and marginalized communities that Mouna has introduced underpins everything else we're discussing today. So librarians, I want you to just think for a minute. Who has noticed that your manga series are super popular among varied and intersected marginalized communities? I wish I could see all your squares because I feel like we'd all be going, That's not to say that any community is a monolith. That's not what I'm saying. Our students have such unique interests and identities and lived experiences within identity groups. And we know that many of our manga readers are members of one or more communities, Black, Indigenous, students of color, queer, and or neurodivergent, and a beautiful combination of the three often. It's amazing, and it's why collecting manga in our libraries is an equity issue. And I'm going to say that again, collecting and supporting manga in our libraries is an equity issue. We can go to the next slide. So Mouna has talked about experiences related to Black fandoms and neurodivergence and queer readers. I'm going to talk a little bit about manga realities related to our Latinx students and our trans students. So again, I want to start with saying there is no monolith. That is not at all what we're suggesting. But some of what is on this slide, librarians just kind of know, and the data is beginning to show it as well. Anime and manga are widely consumed amongst Black, Indigenous youth of color. And there's logistical and thematic reasons why this is. I'm just going to touch on some of the logistical for Latinx students. It's super interesting. Mexico and Central and South America were the original testing ground for exporting anime. So for example, Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon were localized and dubbed in Mexico first before they ever came to the US. Japanese broadcasting licenses are way more cost effective than American ones, which really led to an anime boom in many countries. So there's this rich and still growing anime culture in Latin America today, and that is connected to what you are seeing with your Latinx students in our schools. Next. Our most important stakeholders, like who we have to hold at the center of our work all the time, is of course our students, our learners. We want to make sure to amplify student voice. I timed this with reading and it still came under time. So I'm going to read it really quick because it's student words, which is more important than anything else I can say. You know how they have those affinity groups in high schools as part of equity teams? Honestly, our remote anime club was usually a Latinx affinity group. I'd look at all the little squares and we were all Latinx, well, except Miss Stivers, but we just folded her in. It didn't mean that we necessarily talked about like our Hispanic things, but rather to do something we loved and we didn't have to talk about important issues. We just got to be ourselves, but all together. Does that make sense? In my head, it was an infinity group. Next. So in thinking about how manga connects with trans and non-binary readers, we want to share thoughts created by a trans manga reader and scholar who happens to live in my house. So as Mouna already touched on, gender bending and androgyny have long been represented in Japanese culture, so it comes as no surprise that manga would connect deeply with our trans and non-binary students. The manga Claudine, which you see a picture of here, was written in 1978, focusing on a trans male protagonist. So we're seeing a long history of gender-related themes that compared to Western comics, Japan has historically been more willing to explore those themes of gender in their manga. But clear representation like Claudine isn't the only reason that trans people are drawn to manga. Beautiful anime girls and handsome anime boys like really represent kind of these idealized forms of male and female beauty and can serve as escapism for trans people in a way that more realistic or more cartoonish depictions just cannot. Especially when it comes to Bishonen, and Mouna touched on this too. Differences in kind of Japanese and Western male beauty standards means that these characters show a softer, less stereotypical, I almost said toxic, less stereotypical masculinity, which could resonate with trans and non-binary student readers. Next, please. We have some more student wisdom. Both of these were written by trans student. The Venn diagram between our GSA, Gender and Sexualities Alliances, and Anime Club has a lot of the same people in the middle. I don't know how else to explain the connection other than this. For most of us, manga and anime just have pan energy. Honestly, I've made most of my friends in the manga section or at Anime Club. It's where the queer people are. It has never been more important to support all of our students, especially our queer students. And by having anime clubs and anime programming, we can do that. Next. I wish we had a whole hour just to talk about communities and manga, because our job as school librarians demand, like joyfully require, that we're centering in our libraries communities which have historically and are still being marginalized. Think of the etymology of that word marginalized, communities and students that have been pushed to the margins. That's why we need to center always, and thinking of our library programming and our collections. We've just briefly introduced topics here that we've dove into like much deeper in our work. I want to pivot to manga and instruction, including clubs, next. So collaborating with English teachers in our schools is a really powerful way to support your students' literacy and their interests. When a student who loves manga is sitting in their classroom, it is incredibly affirming when a manga is chosen as a class text, right? And using manga for a co-taught or librarian-led lesson is models to our English teacher colleagues that manga is literature, right? And we can do the same things with manga that we can do with any other class text. It's worthy of study in the classroom from elementary to middle to high school. Some examples of the rich collaborations you can do with manga are here. An elementary lesson on reading manga with Sybil and I, test prep with Demon Slayer, the hero's journey with My Hero Academia, and a high school lesson on humanity, a whole unit, excuse me, with Full Metal Alchemist. Next. Collaborating with classroom teachers, I know it can be challenging, right? It takes a ton of time to seek out those connections, to build the lessons, and the need to constantly advocate for ourselves as literacy leaders in the building, especially as many of us are being pulled for things like device deployment and break-fix Chromebooks. But everything we can do to collaborate with our content area colleagues is so, so beneficial for our students. Because the rewards are increased classroom time with students, and opportunity to promote our library resources, and knowing that we're infusing their curriculum with engaging texts that our students want to read. Adding manga to the repertoire of possible content collaborations can boost not only the transformative power of collaboration, but also our standing as literacy experts in our schools. So what can you do with manga in a subject area classroom besides English? So much. So some examples of the rich lessons you can do, and this is elementary environmental science lesson with Studio Ghibli, a middle school biology lesson with Cells at Work, and then some high school looks at history with Okinawa and art with Blank Canvas, My So-Called Artist Journey. Next, taking my time. There's no question that librarians shine in clubs. We need to own that, right? It builds on our programming skills, our resource knowledge, and our ability to create these deep relationships. We can create clubs where our students both succeed and belong. And infusing manga and anime into our club options will only increase popularity, inclusivity, engagement, and literacy. So some quick examples of things that we can do. It can go far beyond just showing anime, and by just showing anime, I have had amazing clubs where that's what we did, was watch anime. But even going beyond watching anime together or discussing manga, I want to share with some other ideas. Mouna already shared so many awesome ones. You can have students create their own anime awards. I'm literally doing this next week for this special day that we have. So I just sent out a survey for nominations, and we'll do the anime awards together next week. This can be like a one-time activity or like a multi-club, really cool design project. You can have character debates or hot takes on a continuum. I love doing this with clubs and classes because it gets students up and moving. And another, you can support your students' artistic endeavors and their intense interests, maybe hyperfixations, by creating manga and anime journals, which is so fun from K through 12. Ashley also has an entire lesson plan specifically for elementary anime clubs, because we know that can be tricky when you're thinking about planning that. Next, I think that's the end of mine, and I made it under time. Yay! Okay, I'll introduce the questions just because my mic is already on. These are questions that came from you that were sent to Booklist. And so we went through and consolidated and picked out the most popular questions that we wanted to make sure we had a chance to answer.
You want me to start with this one? Okay, yeah. So why do you think manga is growing in popularity right now? So one of the big reasons I would say is the accessibility. Manga is really easy to get into as opposed to many Western superhero comics. In Western superhero comics, there's a lot of crossover from one series to another, and it's hard to really keep track of a true continuity. Whereas manga, you just have to find volume 1, and that's where you start. Another facet of the accessibility is the availability of manga and webcomic reading apps from the 2010s and onward. And those were especially used a lot during the pandemic. So everyone was stuck inside and needed things to do. And manga readership went up, in fact. And fandom culture as a whole is bigger now than ever before. People are attending conventions. People are talking about their favorite series, books, movies online. And with that, that includes anime and manga fan culture. So it's crossing over with fandom culture in general. So I would say those are the main factors leading to the growing popularity these days.
All right, some of the best ways to stay on top of new releases and what's trending is a lot of the publishers like Viz and Kodansha and Yen Press, they have librarian or just general newsletters that you can subscribe to. So they send out, you know, what's being released, what's upcoming. So you get emails for what's gonna come out. You can follow them on social media and see, you know, what people are talking about, and, you know, look at the comments, look at the likes, like what are people talking about? And then I think we mentioned it, if you're able to go to cons, and some of these publishers are starting to come to library cons, which is great. So, you know, Viz and Kodansha and I think Yen Press came to ALA. And so, yeah, it was great having these people come to us now. So you can come to them, or you can come to their booths and talk to them and, you know, get signed up for their stuff and then see what's happening and what's coming out.
So what's a good way to advertise your collection? So what I like to do is include manga in themed displays that aren't necessarily about manga. So one example is we had at a library I worked at in Northern Virginia, we had a display called Spring Vibes, and that could encapsulate a lot of things. So some of the books that I included, along with many YA titles, included Aoharu Ride by Io Sakisaka and Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya, and a display about disability representation. We included the series Run on Your New Legs, which is about an athlete with prosthetic limbs. So since manga encompasses a limitless amount of topics and genres, I think a great way to get manga in front of new eyes is to include it in displays that aren't necessarily about manga. And how to stay current on what's buying and what's dying. So one of the ways that I like to stay current is I follow, as was mentioned before, following the publishers on social media platforms. They always announce their new acquisitions and release dates with a description of the book and the cover illustration. And one of my favorite ways, including that, is to go to anime conventions. It's really a great way to really be in the trenches in regards to what people are talking about, what people are super into. See what people are cosplaying from. If you see some common themes, you'll know, oh, there's a big following for this. People are talking about this. So go from the perspective of an attendee as an observer. You'll see what people are talking about, what genres are important to people, and also what artists and creators are talking about and displaying.
Okay, so we had a lot of questions about where to go and what titles. So we put together a whole list of recommendations for y'all. So that's going to get sent out. And we put some links for you. So there's my site, graphiclibrary.org, Ashley's site, mangalibrary.com. Mangalibrarian.com. There's noflyingnotights.com. So that's run by Robin Brenner, Eva Valin, a bunch of people, like tons of librarians contribute reviews to that site, and not just manga, but comics, tons of graphic novels, like so many good books and reviews from there, and they all have age ratings on it. Of course, you can get booklets and School Library Journal. We're starting to up the manga reviews and stuff in there. And then I mentioned before School Library Journal's blog, Good Comics for Kids. But there's, it is, definitely we're trying as much as possible to put as much information for age relevancy out there into the world, but we appreciate that this is a hard thing to get and we're helping as much as possible.
So I already addressed this one, but just a reminder, think of the S when reading manga. And again, it's not backwards, because backward implies that Japanese culture is then backwards, which of course it is not. But just think of the S. So it's probably the easiest way to keep it in mind. Most manga, I will say too, will have a little a reminder in the cover, on the inside back cover. It'll normally, when you open it up, like you would a Western type book, it'll say you're reading the wrong way and here's how to do it. A lot of manga do that because they know that we're not used to the format. So most of the time, as Sarah has here, it'll have that in the book itself. So it'll say like, hey, you're reading the wrong way, here it goes. So most manga will do that.
What challenges with the illustrations have been faced from parents? So I would say mostly sexual implications, such as fan service, silhouetted nudity, depictions of LGBT relationships, and violence. There's something to be said about the idea that what's seen in fiction may impact real life actions. We saw it a lot with in the 80s and 90s regarding video games, for example. And it's a very similar thing with comments related to depictions of these things in manga. One resource that I would recommend in regards to these, and they also include many cases of this happening, is the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. They have many resources and examples of challenges regarding to not only comics as a whole, but they have sections specifically about manga.
Okay, this is a good piggyback for that last one. Every conversation, right, is an opportunity to advocate for manga. And I know that can be difficult, like when we're like, it could be something that is really the person standing in front of us, whoever the gatekeeper is, and I'll talk about how we can like differentiate how we respond depending on the gatekeeper. I try to look at these opportunities as a gift, right? It's like our opportunity to frame manga in such a positive way, and that really can make an impact on who you're talking to. So my pitch is always a little different. If it's an administrator that's coming to you, my answer is going to focus on the standards and how manga hits literacy standards like across disciplines. If it's a teacher, I'm going to focus on curriculum connections and how manga and all graphic novels reach multiple literacies. And everything I'm saying can apply at this point for manga and graphic novels. And if it's a parent, I would probably lead with the complex vocabulary that manga and graphic novels and comic books have in relation to text only books. But no matter who the gatekeeper is, I always finish with manga builds readers. And we know that strong readers, that influences academic and life outcomes across subjects, across disciplines. Every gatekeeper cares about that. So going hand in hand with that is what resources are available. And so Sara mentioned the title list that was put together. One of the tabs says resources, and there's a bunch of publisher resources. And then at the bottom, I put some resources like what I'm talking about, because I think having a few citations in your back pocket is super helpful. If I can rattle off a citation, it reassures the listener that I know what I'm talking about. I'm coming from this like from an academic scholarly side. And not just because I think it's pretty. I mean, I do think it's pretty, but I'm going to come at it like from both sides. So choose one that you're invested in. So for example, if a teacher said, I don't want manga chosen for this like independent reading project, I would be like, oh my gosh, you're so good. I've noticed you're so good at scaffolding, like high level vocabulary. Did you know that a University of Oregon study found that comic books have more rare words and complex vocabulary than text only books? There's no way for that person to respond other than, oh, right? Like you're literally saying something you care about in your classroom, you are going to be able to hit if you let students choose manga. That's what I got. I don't want to take up, we could spend a whole hour on that question.
I'm an English teacher, and so what this question, how do you address the difference in text versus visual things like violence and then reading versus seeing? I always think about the opportunity for like an educational moment. And this question, I'm not sure if it's really asking about like potential issues or more just like the opportunity to teach. The difference between like inference and versus just reading the word on the page. So I'm going to approach it like an educator, and I think about the opportunity to teach inference and the importance of understanding the reading of a visual, because that is an essential skill for our students in this digital age. We live in a visual world, and so many of our students are visual learners that learning to read images is an essential part of the standards, and it's a standard that across this curriculum. So that's how I'm interpreting this question, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to teach those skills to our students. And a lot of the ideas can be applied to graphic novels because manga does share a lot with our graphic novels and comic books, but I think there is something a little special about manga that other comic books and graphic novels don't have, and that is the access it provides to a different culture. There are a lot of graphic novels and comics from different cultures, but manga specifically allows students into a different culture that is so very different from what they see. And so many of our students really live in a very narrow world where they don't really even understand like the bigger world outside of them. They kind of see one lane, or they see just what's around them. And access to manga lets them see that the world is bigger than themselves, or bigger than just the tiny world that they see around them. So that's one of the great things, especially with the way it's read and the way it's shown, that they get to have that access that they may not be able to have otherwise. Next one.
All right, this is there's a link in our resources tab. Dr. Neil Cohen has done extensive research on this. You can do a deep dive on his website. And the next question, because we're running short on time. Yes, there are tons of free review copies, Edelweiss and NetGalley. Sign yourself up, put librarian in the reason for review, and you will get free copies. And those newsletters I said before, they send out free copies. So sign yourself up. And I think that's our last question. Yay!
Thank you so much, Emily, Julie, Mouna, and Sara. That was such an insightful presentation. So many great nuggets of wisdom in there. We will now be joined by Juan Rivera, the Secretary-Treasurer of the American Association of School Librarians and the librarian at A. Philip Randolph Campus High School in Harlem, who is going to share some resources and information about AASL. Take it away, Juan.
Thank you all for this fascinating presentation. I always go to your events and I always learn something new. For those who might not be members of AASL, it's a great time to join. It is AASL's mission to empower leaders to transform teaching and learning. AASL's vision is that every school librarian is a leader and every learner has a school librarian. Embedded in a lot of the work in AASL's in this this book that's coming up, the AASL manga book, is the alignment to the an application to the AASL National Library Standards as an added bonus to all AASL and ALA edition standards-based learning series. There's something for every grade level and includes topics of projects-based learning, learning centers, picture books, collaboration, STEAM, and SEL. Next. AASL also offers books for immersive study and application of the National Library Standards. Take a deep dive into the shared foundations and broaden your perspective, make connections for personal relevance, and innovate and reflect on your practice. Assessing learners unpacks a complex and critical area of school library instruction and leadership, and will assist you in developing your leadership style and skills. Next. Round out your professional learning needs by learning how to embrace and celebrate your learners' cultures and increasing positive perceptions of your school library. Members receive a 10% discount and all books can be found in the ALA store. Next, we invite any non-member with us today to join AASL and be part of a great association. You can see there are several benefits that come with membership, but you will find out the value of what you get back by being part of the only association dedicated solely to our field. Next, AASL's new strategic plan is all about engagement. Meaningful engagement by creating opportunities for school librarians to be seen and recognized. Leadership engagement by mentoring, connecting, and advancing school librarians as leaders. And purposeful engagement as we actively and intentionally influence policy. Next, it all comes together in St. Louis at AASL National Conference, and I'm hoping we'll have a lot of manga programming, and this seems to be a very interesting and current topic. One kind of experience, it is a conference surrounded by over 2,000 school librarians from across the country. And the books, authors, membership, education, all of it will be there. I encourage you all to meet us in St. Louis next fall. Let's connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Juan, and one more huge thank you to today's panelists, Emily, Julie, Mouna, and Sara, authors along with Ashley Hawkins of Manga Goes to School, Cultivating Engagement and Inclusion in K-12 Settings from ALA Editions, which you can see here. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of Manga Goes to School to get more insightful tips about how manga can help cultivate engagement and inclusion in your classroom or library, use the code on this screen to get 30% off the list and member ALA store prices through November 15th of this year. We will send this code and a link to the ALA store in our follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you to our friends at ALA Editions for offering this special discount. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's video recording, slide presentation, and a certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar, and one more huge thank you to Emily, Sara, Julie, Mouna, and Juan, and to our partner, AASL. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.